Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Bruno, Barbara called out, her voice strained. Could you please come here for a minute? The volume of the TV lowered slightly, followed by the creaking of the old leather recliner. Footsteps approached, and Bruno appeared in the doorway, a look of mild annoyance on his face. What is it? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. Barbara took a deep breath, trying to calm herself before speaking. I was hoping you could give me a hand with some of these chores. The house is a mess, and I'm feeling overwhelmed. Bruno's eyebrows furrowed. But isn't that why we have Rosa? To take care of all this stuff? Rosa had to leave suddenly. Her mother is ill, and she needs to take care of her for a while, Barbara explained, her patience wearing thin. I thought maybe you could pitch in and help out while she's gone. Bruno shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. I don't know, Barbara. That's not really my thing. Can't we just hire someone temporary? Barbara's grip on the sponge tightened, her knuckles turning white. That's not the point, Bruno. We're partners. We should be able to share these responsibilities. Look, I work hard all day. When I come home, I just want to relax, Bruno argued, his voice rising slightly. I'm not comfortable doing all this domestic stuff. The sponge flew across the room, narrowly missing Bruno's head and splattering suds against the wall. Barbara's chest heaved as she fought to control her anger. Get out! She hissed through clenched teeth. Just get out of my sight! Bruno's eyes widened in surprise, but he didn't argue. He turned and left the kitchen, the sound of the TV volume increasing once again. Barbara slumped against the counter, tears of frustration welling up in her eyes. This wasn't the first time they'd had this argument, and she was tired of feeling like she was fighting a losing battle. As she wiped away a stray tear, an idea began to form in her mind. She reached for her phone and dialed Rosa's number. After a few rings, the familiar voice of their housekeeper answered. Rosa, it's Barbara. I hope I'm not bothering you, she began, her voice softening. How's your mother doing? Oh, Senora Barbara, it's good to hear from you, Rosa replied warmly. Mama is improving, thank God. The doctors say she may be able to come home soon. That's wonderful news, Rosa. I'm so glad to hear it, Barbara said sincerely. Listen, I hate to ask, but I was wondering if you might be able to help me with something. As Barbara outlined her plan, Rosa listened intently, occasionally chuckling or offering suggestions. By the time they hung up, both women were in high spirits, eagerly anticipating the execution of their scheme. The next morning, Barbara woke early, carefully applying her makeup and selecting a crisp, tailored suit in a deep navy blue. She styled her hair into an elegant updo and slipped on a pair of sleek heels. As she made her way downstairs, she found Bruno already at the kitchen table, hunched over a cup of coffee and scrolling through his phone. Good morning, dear, she said cheerfully, pouring herself a cup. I have a surprise for you today. Bruno looked up, his eyebrows raised in suspicion. A surprise? What kind of surprise? Barbara smiled enigmatically. You'll see. Get dressed and meet me in the living room in 20 minutes. Before Bruno could protest, she swept out of the kitchen, leaving him to wonder what she had in store. 20 minutes later, Bruno trudged into the living room, dressed in his usual khakis and polo shirt. He found Barbara perched on the edge of the sofa, a garment bag draped across her lap. What's going on, Barbara? He asked warily. She stood holding out the garment bag. Since you're so uncomfortable with domestic stuff, I thought we'd try a little experiment. Inside this bag is your new uniform. Bruno's eyes narrowed. Uniform? What are you talking about? You're going to be our new housekeeper until Rosa returns, Barbara explained, her tone leaving no room for argument. And to really get into character, you're going to dress the part. Bruno's face flushed red. You can't be serious. I'm not wearing whatever's in that bag. Barbara's smile never wavered. Oh, but you are. Unless, of course, you'd rather start helping out around the house as yourself. For a moment, Bruno looked like he might explode. Then his shoulders sagged in defeat. "Fine," he grumbled, snatching the garment bag from her hands. "But this is ridiculous." As Bruno stomped upstairs to change, Barbara allowed herself a small, victorious smile. Phase 1 of the plan was complete. 15 minutes passed before Bruno's tentative footsteps could be heard on the stairs. Barbara straightened her posture, schooling her features into a mask of calm authority. Bruno appeared in the doorway, his face a mixture of embarrassment and anger. He wore a knee-length black dress with a white apron, complete with frilly edges. Black stockings covered his legs, and a pair of sensible black shoes adorned his feet. "This is humiliating," he muttered, tugging at the hem of the dress. Barbara stood, circling him with an appraising eye. "It's not quite complete," she mused. "We'll need to do something about your hair and face." Before Bruno could protest, she was ushering him out the door and into the car. They drove in tense silence to a nearby beauty parlor, where Rosa was waiting for them with a mischievous glint in her eye. "Ah, Senora Barbara, and this must be our new helper," Rosa said, barely containing her laughter. Bruno shot Barbara a withering glare, but allowed himself to be led to a styling chair. Over the next hour, he endured a whirlwind of activity as his hair was washed, styled, and pinned beneath a lace cap. Makeup was applied to his face, softening his features and adding a touch of color to his cheeks and lips. Finally, his nails were shaped and painted a soft pink. As Bruno stared at his reflection in disbelief, Barbara approached, a satisfied smile on her face. "Perfect. From now on, you'll answer to the name Keela, and you'll address me as Madame, understood?" Bruno opened his mouth to argue, but caught sight of Rosa's knowing smirk in the mirror. His shoulders slumped in resignation. "Yes, Madame," he muttered. They returned home, and Barbara wasted no time in putting Keela to work. She handed Bruno a feather duster and pointed to the living room. "Start with the dusting and make sure you get into all the corners," she instructed. "When you're done, move on to vacuuming. I'll be in my study if you need anything." As Barbara settled into her home office, she could hear the clumsy sounds of Bruno attempting to navigate his new role. There were occasional thuds and muffled curses, but she resisted the urge to check on him. This was a lesson he needed to learn on his own. Hours passed, and Barbara emerged from her study to find the living room in a state of disarray. Bruno sat in the middle of the floor, surrounded by cleaning supplies, his wig askew and makeup smudged. "This is impossible," he groaned, looking up at Barbara with pleading eyes. "How does Rosa do this every day?" Barbara's expression softened slightly. She knelt beside him, careful not to wrinkle her suit. "It takes practice and patience," she said gently. "Why don't we work on it together?" For the rest of the afternoon, Barbara guided Bruno through the proper techniques for dusting, vacuuming, and polishing. As they worked side by side, she couldn't help but notice a change in his demeanor. The initial resistance gave way to curiosity and eventually a sense of accomplishment as rooms began to shine under their combined efforts. As evening approached, they tackled the kitchen together. Barbara showed Bruno how to properly load the dishwasher, explaining the importance of pre-rinsing dishes and arranging them for maximum efficiency. "I never realized how much thought goes into all of this," Bruno admitted, carefully placing a plate in the rack. Barbara nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "It's not just about the physical labor. It's about creating a comfortable, welcoming environment for our family." As they worked, the tension between them began to dissipate. Bruno's movements became more fluid, less awkward in his feminine attire. He even cracked a few jokes about his appearance, causing Barbara to laugh genuinely for the first time in weeks. When the kitchen was spotless, Barbara turned to Bruno with a thoughtful expression. "Why don't you start on dinner while I finish up some work? There's a recipe for chicken stir-fry on the counter." Bruno's eyes widened. "You want me to cook? I've never—" "Just follow the recipe," Barbara encouraged. "You might surprise yourself." With a deep breath, Bruno nodded and set to work. Barbara retreated to her study, listening to the sounds of chopping and sizzling emanating from the kitchen. After an hour, the aroma of garlic and ginger filled the air, drawing her back downstairs. She found Bruno plating the stir-fry, a look of concentration on his face as he arranged the vegetables just so. When he noticed her presence, he straightened up, a hint of pride in his eyes. "Dinner is served, madame," he announced with a flourish. They sat down to eat, and Barbara was pleasantly surprised by the flavors. "This is delicious, Bruno," she said, forgetting the Keela charade for a moment. "You did an excellent job." A faint blush colored Bruno's cheeks, visible even beneath the makeup. "Thank you. It was kind of fun, actually." As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily than it had in months. They discussed their day, laughed over Bruno's mishaps, and even touched on deeper topics they'd been avoiding. "I'm sorry I've been so resistant to helping out," Bruno said softly, pushing the last few grains of rice around his plate. "I guess I never really understood how much work goes into maintaining our home." Barbara reached across the table, squeezing his hand gently. "And I'm sorry for not communicating my frustrations better. We're a team, Bruno. We should be supporting each other, not working against one another." After dinner, they tackled the dishes together, Bruno washing while Barbara dried. As they worked in companionable silence, Barbara noticed Bruno's gaze lingering on his reflection in the window above the sink. "What are you thinking?" she asked, bumping his hip playfully with her own. Bruno chuckled, shaking his head. It's strange. I feel different in these clothes. Not just physically, but I don't know. It's hard to explain." Barbara nodded encouragingly. "Go on." "It's like I can see things from a different perspective," he continued, his voice thoughtful. "I feel more nurturing, I guess. And there's something freeing about it, as ridiculous as that sounds." "It doesn't sound ridiculous at all," Barbara assured him. "Sometimes stepping outside of our usual roles can help us discover new aspects of ourselves." As they finished the dishes, Bruno yawned widely, the events of the day catching up with him. Barbara smiled, gesturing towards the stairs. "Why don't you go get changed and relax? You've earned it." Bruno nodded gratefully and headed upstairs. When he returned a short while later, he was back in his usual attire, face scrubbed clean of makeup. He settled onto the couch next to Barbara, who was flipping through a magazine. "So," he began, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "What happens now?" Barbara set the magazine aside, turning to face him. "That depends on you, Bruno. What do you want to happen?" He was quiet for a moment, brow furrowed in thought. "I want us to be better," he said finally. "I want to be a true partner to you in all aspects of our life together." A warm smile spread across Barbara's face. "I want that too." "And—" Bruno hesitated, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. "I think I'd like to explore this other side of myself a bit more, if that's okay with you." Barbara leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his cheek. "Of course it is. We can figure it out together." Over the next few weeks, Bruno threw himself into learning the ins and outs of household management. Some days he worked alongside Barbara in his regular clothes. Other days he donned the dress and wig, embracing his Keela persona. They developed a system, dividing chores and responsibilities in a way that played to both of their strengths. Bruno discovered a newfound interest in cooking, experimenting with recipes and taking pride in preparing meals for them. Barbara, in turn, found herself with more free time to pursue her own interests, picking up painting again after years of neglect. One evening, as they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset, Bruno turned to Barbara with a thoughtful expression. "You know, I've been thinking," he began, his voice soft. "All this housework has given me a lot of time to reflect. I think I might want to try my hand at writing." Barbara's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Writing? That's wonderful, Bruno. What kind of writing?" He shrugged, a shy smile playing at his lips. "I'm not sure yet. Maybe short stories? I've had all these ideas swirling around in my head lately. Characters and situations. I think I'd like to try putting them down on paper." "I think that's a fantastic idea," Barbara enthused, squeezing his hand. "You should absolutely pursue it." As the days passed, Bruno began carving out time for writing. Sometimes he'd sit at the kitchen table, scribbling in a notebook while dinner simmered on the stove. Other times, Barbara would find him curled up in an armchair, laptop balanced on his knees, lost in his fictional worlds. The more he wrote, the more confident he became, both in his writing and in himself. He started sharing snippets of his stories with Barbara, his eyes lighting up as he described the characters and plots he was developing. One Saturday morning, Barbara awoke to find Bruno's side of the bed empty. Curious, she made her way downstairs, following the sound of clacking keys to the study. There she found Bruno, dressed in the black dress and wig, furiously typing away at the computer. "Bruno?" she called softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up, a slightly sheepish expression on his face. "Oh, good morning. I hope I didn't wake you." Barbara shook her head, moving to stand behind him. "Not at all. What are you working on?" Bruno's eyes sparkled with excitement. "I had this idea for a character, a man who discovers a hidden part of himself through an unusual circumstance. I woke up with the whole story in my head and I just had to get it down." As Barbara read over his shoulder, she felt a swell of pride and love for her husband. The story was raw, but filled with emotion and insight, clearly drawn from Bruno's own experiences over the past weeks. "This is beautiful, Bruno," she murmured. "You have a real talent." He beamed up at her, the joy evident on his face. "Thank you. I never thought I'd find something I loved doing this much." As the weeks turned into months, Bruno's writing flourished. He began submitting stories to literary magazines, facing rejection with determination rather than discouragement. And then on a morning, an email arrived that changed everything. "Barbara!" Bruno's shout echoed through the house. "Barbara, come quick!" She rushed to the study, finding Bruno staring at his computer screen in disbelief. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," he breathed, turning the screen so she could see. "Everything's right. They want to publish my story." Barbara's eyes widened as she read the email, a prestigious literary journal expressing interest in Bruno's latest submission. "Oh my God, Bruno, this is amazing!" They embraced, laughing and crying tears of joy. As they celebrated Bruno's success, Barbara couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. What had started as a desperate attempt to teach Bruno a lesson had blossomed into a journey of self-discovery and renewed love. That evening, as they sat on the porch swing once again, Bruno turned to Barbara with eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you," he said softly, taking her hand in his. Barbara tilted her head, confused. "For what? For pushing me out of my comfort zone, for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself." He paused, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "And for introducing me to Kayla. She's taught me more than I ever could have imagined." Barbara leaned in, resting her head on his shoulder. "We've both learned a lot, I think, about ourselves and each other." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Bruno and Barbara sat in comfortable silence, grateful for the unexpected journey that had brought them closer together. They knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as true partners, supporting and encouraging each other every step of the way. In the years that followed, Bruno's writing career flourished. He published a collection of short stories, many inspired by his experiences as Kayla, which received critical acclaim for its nuanced exploration of identity and self-discovery. Barbara's painting also saw a resurgence, with her vibrant canvases gracing the walls of local galleries. Their home became a haven of creativity and mutual respect. Bruno continued to share in the household responsibilities, sometimes as himself and sometimes as Kayla, finding joy in the dual aspects of his personality. Barbara, in turn, learned to communicate her needs more effectively, fostering an environment of open dialogue and understanding. They hosted dinner parties where Bruno's culinary skills shone, impressing their friends with elaborate meals and decadent desserts. On quieter evenings, they would sit side by side, Bruno writing while Barbara sketched, occasionally pausing to share ideas or simply enjoy each other's company. As for Rosa, she returned to find a household transformed. Though her services were still valued, her role evolved into more of a partnership with Bruno and Barbara. She took pride in mentoring Bruno, sharing her years of experience and family recipes. The three of them often worked together, filling the house with laughter and the tantalizing aromas of home-cooked meals. One lazy Sunday afternoon, as Bruno and Barbara lounged in the backyard, surrounded by the colorful blooms of Barbara's carefully tended garden, Bruno broached a subject that had been on his mind. "I've been thinking," he began, his fingers idly tracing patterns on Barbara's arm. "What would you think about renewing our vows?" Barbara sat up, surprise and delight shining in her eyes. "Really? You want to do that?" Bruno nodded, a soft smile playing at his lips. "We've come so far, grown so much together. I think it would be beautiful to reaffirm our commitment to each other, celebrating who we are now." Tears welled up in Barbara's eyes as she pulled Bruno close. "I think that's a wonderful idea," she whispered. They planned a small, intimate ceremony in their backyard, surrounded by close friends and family. As the day approached, Bruno found himself facing an unexpected dilemma. "Barbara!" he called out one evening, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Can I ask you something?" She looked up from her book, noting the serious expression on his face. "Of course, love. What is it?" Bruno took a deep breath, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "For the vow renewal, I was wondering if it would be okay if Kayla made an appearance." Barbara's eyebrows rose in surprise, but a warm smile soon spread across her face. "Are you sure? You know our friends and family will be there?" He nodded, a mixture of nervousness and determination in his eyes. "I'm sure. Kayla is a part of me now, a part of us. It feels right to acknowledge that." Touched by his openness and courage, Barbara moved to sit beside him, taking his hands in hers. "Then of course it's okay. I'm so proud of you, Bruno." On the day of the ceremony, Bruno started the morning as himself, greeting guests and helping with last-minute preparations. But as the time drew near, he slipped away to change. When he emerged, Keela stood in his place, resplendent in a flowing sundress, the color of summer skies. A hush fell over the gathered crowd as Kayla made her way down the makeshift aisle. Some faces registered shock, others confusion, but as Kayla reached Barbara, who stood waiting in an elegant cream-colored suit, their radiant smiles seemed to put everyone at ease. The officiant, a close friend who had been let in on the plan, handled the situation with grace and good humor. "Well, folks," he began, his eyes twinkling, "it seems we have a bit of a surprise today. But love, in all its forms, is always worth celebrating." As Bruno and Barbara exchanged their renewed vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. They spoke of growth, of challenges overcome, and of the deep, abiding love that had seen them through it all. When they sealed their commitment with a kiss, the backyard erupted in cheers and applause. The reception that followed was filled with joy and laughter. Bruno alternated between his two personas, changing outfits several times throughout the evening. Their friends and family, after the initial surprise, embraced the situation with open minds and hearts, many expressing admiration for Bruno's bravery and the couple's unconventional journey. As the night drew to a close, Bruno and Barbara found a quiet moment alone, swaying gently to the soft music that still played. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.